Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm just going to take a moment to let people start getting logged in. Um, all right. I see our numbers starting to go up. Well, welcome back, everybody. We were just talking about how it's nice to be back and how it has been a while since our last virtual plant clinic. So we're all happy to be back and looking forward to getting started with our spring season. For those of you who have attended our plant clinics before, we're of course happy to have you all back. I'm just going to go through a few notes for anyone who is joining us for the first time. So for those of you who are regulars, just bear with me for the next couple of minutes. Welcome to our virtual plant clinic. For anyone who has not attended before, I do know we get people from a variety of locations since this is an online program. This information, actually today's Houseplants, so that's not really relevant. I would usually say this information is generally geared towards people who are gardening in Zone 7, since our store is based in Northern Virginia. But since David is talking about houseplants and tropical houseplants today, that doesn't matter. It's relevant to everybody. So that's exciting. If you have a question during this class, you will be able to type that question in. This is a webinar format, so we can't actually speak to you, but we are happy to take your questions. I'll be collecting them and then giving them to David when it is time for the question and answer segment. So you'll open your Q&A box on your Zoom menu, type those questions in, and I'll relay them to David once he starts taking questions. Some additional information: we are recording today. If anybody has to leave before the class ends, or if you want to share this with a friend, you can access the recording on our YouTube channel, generally about 24 hours after the class concludes. You are also welcome to email me, and I'd be happy to send you the link directly. And of course, if you have questions after the class, you're always welcome to contact us. I think that covers everything since we've been gone for a while. If I've forgotten anything, David, let me know. But David, I'm going to go ahead and let you get started and get my microphone muted.
Okay, fantastic. Hey, well, again, thanks everybody for joining us. It has been a while. I don't think I've done any of these virtual plant clinics since before Christmas last time. So again, I hope you have wonderful holidays and that your winter's good, and we are all ready to get back to gardening. But of course, because it is the middle of winter, I thought we would start with gardening indoors, inside our house, and talk about a lot of the tropical beauty that's around us. It's also, I feel a little rusty at this, Sally. I think all of us do here. So, a couple little errors along the way that's just bear with us and everything. But so glad you could take some time here with us today. And again, as Sally said, this really, my concept of this whole thing is keep it very casual, conversational, build in plenty of time for questions, comments, sharing your own experiences throughout here. So certainly keep all that in mind, and we have to do it by chat, but I look forward to your participation in that. But to kick things off, I want to say Happy New Year. And with that, I've got a little short video to welcome us to 2024.
新年快乐！新年快乐！
Great. Well, so of course, that's my little play on words there because I'm saying Happy New Year, but it's for the Chinese New Year, which begins on Saturday. we've got, I just work with such a wonderful team here in our marketing department, primarily Bryn's the creative force behind that. It produced that video. And it was such an inspiration to me. I kind of built the whole show around that. I don't pretend to be an expert in, Chinese culture or anything, but just seeing that, of course, it made me curious. I started looking around a little bit and realizing the history. So in Chinese culture, they followed a lunar calendar, while most of us in Western culture were following a solar calendar, following the paths of the sun. But their culture developed following path of the moon. And so this Saturday will be the emergence of the first new moon of the year, and that signals the beginning of spring. And a lot of their traditional events and practices and schedules are built around that. Though, of course, in modern day world, we're kind of all following the same calendar. So again, it's just I think it's a kudos, on their heritage culture. I think it's always been one of my interests with plants is because you can start with plants or gardening and that can go off in all directions, whether it's the history behind them, the culture behind them, the practices behind them. So that's what I will be doing here today is talking about indoor plants and indoor gardening, but really featuring some of the auspicious plants for the Chinese New Year and Year of the Dragon. I took a quick look as that video is up there on the Year of the Dragon, and I guess if your birth year coincides, with the zodiac year, then you get an extra special day. And I was looking, I wasn't that lucky. I'm not on that list. So I looked at all those very positive qualities for the Year of the Dragon. I'm thinking like, well, I missed all that. I think I looked up and I say Year of the Pig or Year of the Boar, but the dragon would have been cool, but so I'm Year of the Pig. That's just the way life is. They have all their good qualities too. Anyway, so it's all good fun and games that's in there. So I wanted to discuss, a little bit the plants that are there, but to kind of start this off, if most of your gardening has been outdoors, we know this whole thing of right plant, right place, where we are going out in the landscape and we're observing, how much sun and shade we have, what the drainage is, what the functionality of that plant is, and what we're really trying to do is partner up our wishes and needs with the environment that's there. So those same concepts hold 100% true indoors, but I always say the basics of it is, what do plants need? The plants need sun, they need water, they need nutrients. We can pretty easily take on the watering and nutritional role, but providing the proper amount of sun, the proper amount of light becomes the #1 challenge indoors. So whenever I'm helping somebody in terms of selecting plants for inside their house, my first question is always, well, tell me about your lighting. What type of lighting conditions we have? Because plants, again, we don't really feed plants. Plants feed us. They are producing their own food. They're using the sun's energy through photosynthesis to produce carbohydrates that then support other life that's out there. So this sunlight component is absolutely essential. And when we're inside our house, that becomes a limiting factor. So I've got a couple little slides here I want to start with to sort of try to describe a little bit of the type of conditions that we're looking for inside a house. So if you look at this, you see, very bright sun coming in through the window. Back there, there's a very sheer curtain that's in there. So this is what I would describe as a bright but indirect light. There's no sun directly hitting the foliage of those plants because, again, there is that sheer curtain. If you had sun coming directly through that window, that's what I'm going to call very high bright light or even direct sun. Even though we have to keep in mind a fair amount of that sunlight we can lose through reflection and refraction. And as we move further back from the window, it becomes more reflected light. So just like you might have little variances in the amount of shade and density of shade in your garden, this same thing will happen inside of your home. So most of the plants that you will want to grow in your home are going to be labeled for this bright indirect light. Conditions similar to what you see here, but quite honestly, a lot of us don't even have this much light. We're dealing with much lower light levels. So what are some examples? Kind of try to clarify what I'm talking about. So if I want really bright, colorful plants with colorful leaves like croton or the dracaena, those are going to need very bright light. They will tolerate and they will look even, their color will intensify even if they get a little bit of direct sun. But we need that very bright indirect light for them to really thrive and look like you see in this picture. If you put these same plants into lower light levels, what will end up happening is the color intensity starts to fade. They go more towards just a lighter green color. The variegation's not as pronounced. So we are back to what I'm calling where now they might be surviving, but they're not actually thriving. So I use a lot of these words and I like to make sure we're very clear on the communications where these plants are going to thrive. These really bright, colorful plants where they're going to thrive is that very bright indirect light, or even a little bit of direct sun can be helpful. Another plant or group of plants that's going to need really high light are going to be most of your flowering plants, quite honestly, because back to what I'm saying is the plant needs sunlight to produce food for itself, and it needs that higher food production to produce flowers for it. So things like the Cattleya orchid, bromeliads, they will live and they will grow in lower light levels, but you will start to see the flowering diminished, the intensity of coloration diminished. So to get them to look like this, we need to put them in that kind of high light condition. You think of cacti and succulents that are adapted to growing in literally like desert or some of them are tropical, but they are adapted to growing in very high light conditions also. So to keep them dense, to keep them full, we need to provide that. You take that same plant and it will survive in lower light levels, but it gets leggy and floppy and types of things like that. If you don't have this kind of bright natural lighting, you can still grow plants, but we're going to look more at just what I'm going to call foliage plants. I'm not talking about flowers. That's pretty much comes off the table. We're not talking about the real bright, highly intense colors. That comes off the table. But we can start to grow just these green tropical plants, like you see the cast iron plant, which is in the background on that little plant stand. That gets its name, the cast iron plant, because it is so durable and it will grow in almost any kind of environment that's there. Pothos is one that you'll see growing in office buildings where they're interior offices and not getting any direct sunlight at all. So that would be an example of a plant that will do better where it gets good natural light. But even if you're not, if you're not blessed with that in your home or don't have it available, then that is basically also a plant that's on the table for you. So that's my little introduction. And like I said, I'm going to go through this in a little more detail. I want to feature now some of these plants, from the Chinese New Year and sort of talk a little bit about their growing conditions, because what we need to do is match the plant to its environment. I'll also go over some of the basics of watering, touch on a few pest control things, and then we'll open it up to the questions. So I put the chrysanthemum in here. I'm just going to start with that because that is very much a tradition in the Asian culture. This does not make a very nice house plant. This is like what I would call seasonal color. Chrysanthemums, they want to be out in a pretty much a full sun type of environment. This is what I would call more seasonal color, where you bring them in, you use them to celebrate through the maybe through the New Year's events that you might be having, or just to brighten up the home. But these are florist grown chrysanthemums. They're not winter hardy for your outdoor garden, and they're very difficult to continue growing year after year on the inside. So that would be an example of, let's say, hey, I realize I'm kind of overlooking Valentine's, which of course is the big day also coming up. But let's say, hey, this is almost like getting somebody a bouquet of roses or something, where you'll get some nice color, enjoy it for several weeks. But when it's done, it's probably pretty much done. A couple other plants that I did want to show, again, following our New Year's theme. And I've got what's called anthurium here, or sometimes called the flamingo flower. This was a new variety, or new to me. They traditionally come in whites, pinks, red. It's in there. I just really love this one that just showing that sort of blank color, that blush of pink in there. I've got to refer to my notes here because I just don't know this stuff that well. But so anthurium is for prosperity. So this might be a plant that you gift or include to bring prosperity to us. And very, very similar to it, and you'll see a similarity here, is the peace lily. Oh, try and bring them. The peace lily is probably better known, and you can see the similarities in how these plants look. This flower arrangement is very common, and we call this is a spathe and spadix, where this is actually the flowering part, and it has this modified leaf to sort of show it off. This is typical of plants in the arum family. And the arum family, these are plants that are best adapted to moderate to low light levels. They like to be kept consistently moist. If you let it dry out, it immediately flops over. And when it flops over, you're getting a clear signal that, hey, I forgot to water, and you need to water that plant. But we don't really want to get to that point, because at that point, if it is floppy and wilty, usually your flowering is diminished a little bit. The plant's stressed, you water it, boom, it comes right back. Looks great, but it's stressed the plant and put a little bit of a hurting on it. So where I have been most successful, quite honestly, growing these plants is in very humid, warm environments. So if you are lucky enough, like if you have a bathroom area or within your kitchen where you might have very high humidity and you're getting some indirect light in there and moist environment, that's where these plants will thrive, and they can live for year after year after year. And they'll just, when they're in good environment, good condition, and good health, they will flower for you just periodically throughout the entire year. You see these in office buildings where I get my car serviced. They have them. You go to the doctor's office, they always have them. But when you see them in those kind of conditions, often neglected, not getting light, they're just kind of hanging out there. They're not really producing the nice flowers that you see. So again, take close observation of lighting conditions are there, which I have as obvious bias. And I think that's a real thing between success and failure in growing plants inside the house. I'm going to mention orchids because I'm just kind of doing this a little bit randomly here. Orchids, and this makes perfectly good sense to me. Love, beauty, and fertility. These we call the Paphiopedilum orchids here. Or no, I'm getting mixed up. The Phalaenopsis orchids that are here. They call us, these are probably the easiest to grow and the best adapted to indoors. This particular one caught my eye, and I have one at home that's about 2 years old now, going into its third flowering sequence, is because it has a variegated leaf. So to me, orchids, they typically bloom for us once a year in the winter time. So we're at peak bloom season right now. And these flowers will last for an incredibly long time. They can last for several weeks. And what they'll do is just like you see going on here, bottom flower opens, next flower opens, next flower opens. They gradually work their way up the bloom spike. Then the old flower dies, new flower opens, old flower dies, new flowers open. So this whole bloom sequence can go on for several weeks that are in there. These are different from other plants. They're not terrestrial. They naturally grow in trees, up in rock crevices and tree branches and everything. And they would have these aerial roots that we can't really see, but these roots just kind of dangle out into air. And as it rains frequently, they're just absorbing their moisture directly out of the rainfall that's there. So they're not growing in a soil. And we have to make sure that we allow them to dry out between watering episodes. The number one biggest problem that I see all the time at Plant Clinic, if you're having difficulty growing orchids, is because you're loving them to death. I keep bragging, like, I do well with orchids in my house because I am the king of neglect. I put them out there and I forget about them. And only when it gets like, sort of ridiculously dry, I realize, oh, I've kind of been a little absent-minded and go out there and soak them. So they're growing in peat moss. This is not soil, it's a very spongy material. I'll soak it really well, just like a sponge. It soaks that up and it holds that moisture. You leave it alone and wait until it's almost not quite completely dry. That's the kind of getting the stress level, but just before getting that completely dry. So I literally have orchids in a small pot like this in a very bright sunny environment, and I find I have to really soak it good. The small ones about once a week, and then the larger ones I might even go every 2 weeks behind it. But it's a ridiculously easy plant to grow. People are intimidated by it because they think it's so exotic, it's going to be so challenging. I can't grow that, but you can. Lots of options as far as fertilizing goes on there, but this is one that many of our customers have really swear by and have great results. This Miracle Grow orchid fertilizer, it's just a spray, it's a mist. You don't put in a watering can or anything. You're just misting it directly onto the leaves, directly on the roots. So it's super easy to use. And everybody that uses it comes back for more. I personally haven't used it, but have had good success. I think I'm going to just show you one more plant, and then I want to talk to you a little bit about watering. Another of these auspicious plants, and they're being super popular over the last couple years, is this the calamundan. This is a hybrid between a mandarin and an orange, but this pretty much holds true for all citrus trees. So again, the calamundan, I got to look at my list. Fruitful and abundance. So that's the meaning here. Fruitful and abundance makes good sense. Everybody wants to grow citrus, and thing is, these flowers are wonderfully, amazingly fragrant. I just have 2 blooms open on here, and it's enough to fragrance the entire room this year. So you get flowers. You have the obvious appeal of being able to grow your own fruit. So whether it's a lemon, lime, calamundan, orange, they are not the easiest plant to grow inside, because this is a plant that wants to be in really full sun. So you literally need like a sunroom environment to be successful with that. I also have people that are growing these and find that oftentimes they have to be hand pollinated, because if we were in an outdoor environment, you'd have insects, primarily bees, that are visiting the flowers and doing that pollination for you. You can have better success with fruit set if you're also willing to put the hand pollinating into it. So they are plants that very rewarding to grow, good reasons to grow, very auspicious plants to grow, all these good plus things to say about, but to be successful with it, you really need to have that sunny environment throughout the winter. You can put them out in your deck or patio in the summertime, but even in the wintertime, you're going to need really good sunlight to be successful with that. So a couple other little comments I want to make, just, and this is just sort of general plant care, is to talk about the watering, because I've emphasized over and over enough umpteen times the importance of good lighting. Also, I think it's important that we, again, use some terms that are there. So plants, they need water. They're like 95% water. The water is 100% absolutely critical to them. That's what circulates the nutrients through there. That's what maintains the turgidity, is essential photosynthesis. Without water, plants die. But the roots, where this water is absorbed, they also need air. They need oxygen for respiration that's in there. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find this balance where we make sure that that soil is moist, but we also have to make sure that it's porous and it has airspace in there. And it's difficult sometimes to balance between these two extremes. So again, I've got a couple pictures I want to show you where, hey, maybe things didn't go so well with that. So this is the spathiphyllum, the peace lily that we just showed. Had the white flowers on. And this was a very special plant. A customer had brought it into the plant clinic for us about a year ago. And it had been his father's plant. His father had passed away. And so this plant had very special meaning to him. right away, you can see that browning and scorching and margins and all the leaves are there. There's clearly something going wrong with it. I went over just to lift the plant up. It was insanely heavy. The thing probably weighed like 40 pounds for a plant that's that size. I knew right away that I was in trouble, so I put it on this cart and took it outside. This is not anything I wanted to attempt in an indoor environment. So I took it, and you can see, laid it over on its side so I could get an examination of the roots. And look at all that water spilling out onto the ground. This container does not have any drainage holes. The customer was diligently watering the plant, but that water was just filling up inside the pot. So it's basically sitting in a tub of, and I mean, I won't be too graphic, but the smell, the odors, and everything that spilled out of that pot, you can see it's pitch dark. Those roots are just literally rotting. And this is a plant that likes wet environments, can even grow in water for a time. So this isn't the extreme, but what it emphasizes to me is why it's so important that we have pots that allow excess water to drain out of there. We took this plant into the greenhouse. This wasn't an insect or disease. The plants are resilient. It was important that we salvage it, so throwing it away is not an option. I want to have a happy ending here, so I have a picture to show you the finished product. So one of our staff in the greenhouse repotted it. This container, that ceramic container that you see there, that also belonged to his father. So we were able to put his father's plant. What we did was we cleaned it up, pulled all the dead stuff off, all the dead roots and everything that's in there, repotted it into a grower's pot. That's why I'm looking around here to show you that actually has drainage. So what I'm trying to talk about is, so we put it just a simple plastic pot, 99-cent pot here. But what this does is it allows you to water thoroughly and completely. So you can take it to the sink or to the bathtub and you can just flood it and make sure that I've watered this completely top to bottom, which is what the plants want. Let the excess water drain out. And then again, you'll notice this has nothing. I'll put that back into a decorative pot. So what we did is a long-term solution for this customer with his anthurium that was there, repotted it into this pot that drains, explained to him how to water. When you water, I want you to really soak it. Overwatering means that I'm watering too much, that's staying constantly wet. It doesn't mean that I'm putting too much water. It means I'm watering too frequently. So we water it really well. He could put it back in the decorative pot, and then that went on to be a big success. So with that, because I'm watching my clock here, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about a few common pest problems that we have, and then we're going to open up for any questions that you might have. So with that, I've got another little video that I'm going to turn to kick off the conversation on pests. That's right.
Common and bothersome issue with indoor plant care, especially in the winter. For the most effective solution, our plant clinic recommends high-yield systemic insect granules or mosquito bits as an organic treatment. Both methods effectively target and eliminate larvae in the soil over a period of time. So to expedite this process, complement either treatment with yellow sticky traps. This additional step tackles the adult gnats, preventing them from laying eggs while the primary treatment works its magic on the larvae in the soil. Say goodbye to fungus gnats.
Yeah, I had to try that. You might have seen, we put that on Facebook a while ago. And that was, of all of the videos I've done over the years, that has been the most popular one that I got. So the deal is, fungus gnats, they're a nuisance. You know, they don't bite, they don't sting, they don't really even do much damage to the plants. But nobody likes these little fungus gnats buzzing around the house. They're attracted to bright things. So that means sometimes they might be attracted to your lights. You're sitting down at dinner and they're buzzing around the lamps at dinner, or they might be attracted to windows as you're sitting there trying to read. A real nuisance that's out there. So what they're doing is the gnats lay their eggs in the soil where the larvae develop, and those larvae are feeding on decaying, decomposing organic matter that's down into the soil. They love the moisture, they love the warmth of being inside, and then we've got all that compost in the mix that's there. So we kind of create this environment that's ideal for them. One of our cultural cares that we didn't have time to discuss in the video goes back to this thing about the moisture and the drainage. Because if we can manage our watering, allow plants to become slightly dry between there, make sure we have a well-drained mix, that can go a long way towards helping to manage the fungus gnats. But at the end of the day, once you have them, usually you know, you're going to have to take some type of treatment that's there. The one that I showed in that video was a systemic granule, much like this. Just showing you different brands. So this is a systemic granule that you would sprinkle in the soil, and as it makes its way into the soil and into the plant, those insects, the larvae, are feeding on them, and it gradually kills them. So it takes a little time, but this has been our most effective treatment. However, let me make it really clear, we do not ever want to be using this on any kind of edible plants. So if I'm growing herbs inside, or I'm growing citrus or anything, because this is systemically absorbed into the plant, this is not an option for you. If you are trying to go with sort of non-chemical or organic methods, then the mosquito bits would be an option for you to consider. These little granules can be dissolved in the watering can and then use that to water into the soil. It has been around for many, many years. It's used for mosquitoes and ponds and bird baths and stuff. It works specifically on fly larvae. It's harmless to people and pets. So if we're doing that sort of organic option, then I would suggest we look at mosquito bits. So that's a real common issue that comes up, and we've got some pretty easy solutions to that. Let me show you a couple other little pests, and then we'll start with the questions. So these are fungus gnats that we're talking about. I was just swatting around the imaginary ones in the video, but I just put that picture in to give you an idea of their size. Again, they're attracted to that bright yellow color, so the sticky traps do pretty good helping to manage that. Another one that you might run into frequently is the mealybug, which we've got in our next picture here. Mealybug and scale, these are both closely related insects. They're both what we call piercing, sucking insect. They stick their mouth into leaf tissue and then they draw the sap out of it. In that process, you'll start to feel this sticky residue that's in there. Sometimes you get that black sooty mold going on there. And they're very common on a broad range of different house plants. Again, we can always talk to you about, like, you can use those systemic granules is one option. You can also use that in conjunction with a horticultural oil. This is a highly refined petroleum oil, but it's been distilled, so all the contaminants are taken out, so it's not harmful to plants. But it's an oil that will easily stain flooring, carpeting, upholstery. So if I decide I want to use this as an approach, I always recommend that you take the plant into a utility room or garage or outdoors on a nice day like today. Spray it with the oil top and bottom. Let that dry. The oil is going to basically suffocate and desiccate the insects that are under there, and then bring that plant back inside. So again, just trying to let you know these are a few things to look out for, and we can help you at the plant clinic. There are solutions to a lot of these things. And this also works on spider mites, which I'll show you in my next picture here. So the oil, that's one thing, that systemic product does not work on spider mites, but this oil does. This is magnified. When you look at these just in real life, it looks almost just like dust. You can't really see the mites, so that we ask that you bring samples in. Let's put in the microscope. And I've got one last picture I wanted to show just for fun and games. I happened to be, down in Florida last week, and this is a really one of the most amazing botanic gardens I've ever been to in my life. And I just, wherever I travel, I just, automatically, as I just scan, say, hey, are there any public gardens nearby? It's what I like to do. So this was a Mounts Botanical Garden, a 16-acre public garden that's down there. Their theme was this origami. So they had taken these origami figures, made them out of metal, and placed them strategically throughout the garden. But what I really want to show you is if you look right in the center in that background, that's a ponytail palm. I had no idea what they would look like in their native environment. When I say ponytail palm, I'm accustomed to like these little house plants, which are easy to grow, wonderful. We want to make sure we keep them a little dry because it's got this kind of bulbous base, which is adapted to holding moisture. They're indigenous to parts of Mexico. But when I saw that one there that was like 25 feet tall, never in my life could I have even imagined that they got that size. And apparently they get bigger. So I have been talking here for too long. Let's take your questions. And Sally, do we have anybody sending questions to us?
We absolutely do. Just a reminder to everybody, if we do not get to your question today, then you are welcome to follow up with us afterwards. You can email me and I will direct your question to David, or you're welcome to call the plant clinic of your nearest store or to call the Fair Oaks store, which is where David is generally located. All righty. Our first question is Linton roses. Should Linton roses be trimmed back now? Mine are just starting to get buds.
So,
is that Helmore? Or is there a houseplant Linton rose?
Oh, no. They're talking about out in the garden.
Gotcha.
So what I like to do, and there's different ways. I kind of groom them. I go out about now, this time of year, and just with some garden shears or garden scissors, I'll selectively cut off the leaves that are most weathered because there's an evergreen, so those leaves come up. They've been out there through the weather. You're right, the flower buds are beginning to show on there. So I just like to clean out the ugly stuff, and usually you have some leaves that look pretty good and some leaves that look pretty bad. And if you don't have a huge garden or large collection, you can go through and just carefully cut out the bad leaves. If you got a large garden, a large patch of them, and you're not willing or interested to put that time to manicure in them, yes, you could go through and just cut all the old foliage off, but use care because some of those buds are coming up and I want to make sure we don't accidentally chop any of the flowers. But
Okay.
they should get new flower buds and new leaves start to emerge now.
Okay. Next question to orchids. What do you personally use to fertilize your orchids?
So I personally, you're not going to believe this, or maybe you will, knowing my propensities and stuff. I think we make too big of a deal about fertilizer. If you get the right environment, meaning the good lighting, the right watering, good cultural care, that's what's most important. I am still using up an old bottle of Miracle Grow drops that I've had for several years. I can't stand to waste anything or throw anything away. I still have some Miracle Grow fertilizer. It's 20 years old and I'm down to the last bit. And when that's gone, then I might switch over. And this is the one I want to try because I've heard so many people reporting such good results. And gardening should be fun. It should be an experiment. So this is kind of what I'm recommending towards you, the spray mist. What I personally use, I'm doing Miracle Grow right now, but I'd use Jack's Classic before that. I'd use the Dynagrow previous to that. I get good results with all of them.
Okay. All righty. Next question. I have a bougainvillea that's been gifted to me. How can I keep it healthy? I don't have too much light.
Oh, I am constantly cautioning people about giving plants as gifts. For this very reason. It's a wonderful idea, good intention, but you've taken a plant that really wants direct sun. These are plants that, grow out in full, intense tropical sun. And you're telling me you're trying to grow it in a low light environment. In a low light environment, that plant's going to be thin. It's going to be leggy. and it's not going to bloom for you. One option that you have available to you, and I brought these in, is to supplement your lighting. I didn't bring a lot of detail in, but basically these are plant lights. These are just the light bulbs, compact fluorescent. This is a spotlight, but you can increase the lighting by getting a light bulb that mimics the same full spectrum that you'd find in natural sunlight. There's LED setups. There's things that you can do to change the environment, but bougainvillea is going to do better for you outdoors in the summertime where you can provide the warmth and the sunshine. Your goal is going to just get it survive through this winter. And that's basically, hey, water thoroughly, let it become not completely dry, partially dry, water thoroughly, and keep it in the brightest light you can possibly provide.
Okay. Next question is on pothos. I'm having a problem with my pothos. I have several and many are losing leaves, spotted, turning yellow, then dying. I can't figure out if it's being underwatered, overwatered, or if it's the location. Do you have any advice?
My first guess is a watering issue that's on there, because again, this is a plant that's very resilient and adaptable to different environments and conditions, plus the shedding, the spotting. Again, these terms, I really hate the word overwatering because it means different things to different people. A lot of times say, oh, I don't want to overwater, so they're only taking like a quarter of a cup, trying to make sure they don't spill it in there. Back to what I'm saying, when you water your plants, most of them, including pothos, I want you to go over the kitchen or the sink, and I want you to saturate it. I want you to water. My old floriculture professor, he said, I want to see at least 25% of the water draining out the bottom. By making sure that you're really doing that, you're flushing out any salts, excess salts that might be in there. You're assuring them watering this top to bottom in profile. But once I've saturated it, I'm going to leave it alone until like the top half or 2/3 of this soil is dry, or you can feel by the weight of it when it starts to feel significantly lighter in your hand. When it starts to feel that way, and that could be 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on the environment and the plant, then you saturate it again. So my gut feeling without seeing the plant is that maybe you're keeping it constantly wet and you need a little bit of dry time to occur, but use your judgment, play with the watering. I don't ever want it to go completely dry, but you do need to allow some period of drying between watering. You're also always encouraged to bring plants to us at the plant clinic, to bring pictures for us. We're here to help diagnose those things.
Yes. Next question. What is the shelf life of the systemic granules that you showed for I think it was for the fungus gnats? I just found an old container I'd forgotten about.
I don't know the exact answer, but we're talking about years. If it's been kept dry, because all this stuff is moisture activated, but if it's been in a container and it's dry, it could last 10, 20 years. So it's probably totally usable. If it's gotten wet, then that may render it useless, and you would pursue whatever your household hazardous waste options are.
Okay. Sorry, I was just reading the next question. This is interesting. Okay. Also, I have a bougainvillea, which feels like the leaves are burning and they're black in color. So it sounds like the leaves might be sunburned. How can I keep it fresh and alive? Is that a common issue? Or does that sound like that's a sunburn?
Well, couple key words that I'm going to
Yes.
respond to when you say black. Like I was talking about, was piercing, sucking insects like scale, mealybugs, and aphids. They will secrete this material, and if it's sticky, gooey, and you're getting a black mold on it,
okay,
then we might be dealing with a pest issue. And again, I'd love to see sample or picture to confirm that. And those systemic granules would help with all that above that's in there. Sunburn, it's very unlikely. I'm not going to say impossible, but you're talking about a plant that thrives in
for bougainvillea. Yeah.
Now, if it was for some reason in a very low light environment and then suddenly introduced, just like I was to go from here and just sit out in the shores of Florida without any kind of sun protection, I would get burned. That could happen, but I want to take a look at that to see if we have any pest issues.
Okay, so potentially it's a pest issue. All right. Oh, okay. So I'm trying to make sure I'm going in order here, and I have some coming in from chat. My question is hints for upkeep and maintenance of fiddly figs. Mine seem to be really ungainly over time. Should I plan to more regularly trim them back?
That's a real popular plant, and you can be, it can do really well, and it can also be a little bit fussy. It's in there. I was standing under a mature 40-foot tall fiddly fig, but my picture didn't come out very well in Florida. That was really cool. When they start getting leggy, we're saying kind of that tall kind of thing on that, again, can be just, you know, insufficient light, or sometimes it's a juvenile plant that they'll grow that way. I don't have any concerns or apprehensions if you do want to prune it or cut the top out of it, and that will induce more branching, but it does change the structure of the plant. So sometimes we'll go that route. Sometimes I've had people where we recommend doing what I call, well, you can look it up on Google. It's called air layering, where you kind of wound the plant and then wrap sphagnum moss around there and get it to propagate some roots, and so on. But it's probably getting tall and leggy just because it wants a little more sunlight than what it's getting. They can be a little temperamental about the watering that's on there. Most ficus prefer to go on the dry side. That particular one, though, I don't like to get quite as dry. It may need watering a little more frequently than other types of ficus do also.
Oh, okay. My condo manager has a fiddly fig in her office that she's ended up naming because it's a little, it gets a little picky sometimes if she moves it.
When they look good, they look beautiful.
Yes. Yeah, she has to baby it. So a little bit, because it's in a kind of a dark space. So she named it, and it has a name.
Always on board with misting your tropical plants. You know, if you just want to show them a little love and they're not great, like again, fiddly fig, hey, just have a little spray mister, mist some water out. They're going to love you for that.
Make them happy. Yes. Yeah. All right. Next question. What are the basic needs of Christmas cactus so it will bloom?
Yeah, so Christmas cactus, again, it's a tropical cactus. So keep that in mind. It's not the same as a desert cactus. They naturally grow as an epiphyte. Again, more like an orchid would. Is the same type of environments or conditions there. To get them to flower, though, which is really your question, just like orchids do, a lot of these tropical plants, they need a temperature difference between the daytime and the nighttime temperature. So again, I'm just using myself as an example, not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying, hey, kind of an empty nester. So my thermostat's set where it literally goes down to, like, 62 degrees when I'm not home. And then it goes back up to 72 degrees when I am home. So we need to get at least that 10-degree temperature differential to initiate flowering on. The easiest way is if you can take it outdoors, not now in winter, but during the growing season. If you want to take it outdoors, in an indirect light under the shade, kind of, again, try and create those conditions, and it gets that temperature shift, that is what's going to initiate the flowering when you bring it back in. Or some people have one room that's cold and drafty, and you can put it in there for, let's say, a month or so, and then bring it back into the warmer part of your house. But you have to work on the temperatures.
Gotcha. Okay. Alrighty. This is a good question. How do houseplants get scale on them when you've had them for years, scale free?
So scale, I didn't go through the whole life cycle, but there is a point where their eggs hatch, and it's what we call the crawler stage. And when they emerge out as a crawler, they are about the size of a little speck of pepper or salt is their size, and they're mobile. That's when they've got their 6 legs and they're moving around. At that point, they are so small and so tiny that in a natural environment outdoors, they'll move in the wind. They literally, birds, they'll get onto their feet or feathers and move around. They can get onto your hands, your clothing. They're so tiny you would never even know that they are there. So they get, all I can tell you is introduced from someplace, usually in that little immature mobile stage, which is only about 5 or 10 days of their entire life. And then it's, then they're there. But yeah, it's always a mystery. If you bring, sometimes you can bring them home with a plant, bring a new plant. If you find a problem like that, it's keep that plant isolated from the others, because scalar generalist insects, some people recommend it's not a bad idea. Anytime you bring a new plant in the house, they'll kind of put it in quarantine for a while to make sure they're not introducing a pest. I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with that either.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that makes good sense. Well, I had spider mites get on a banana plant really badly, and I had to fight them constantly. It never spread to the other plants, and I didn't even notice it for a long time. But I don't know. It's just I feel like sometimes stuff just appears. But
Yeah.
that's why I'm always glad I can call you and ask for help.
Again, these are generalist insects, but like you're noting, they have their favorites.
They have preferences, definitely. All right. Does a majestic palm do okay in direct sunlight?
Yes, again, that's probably the biggest challenge. You don't hear me talking about palms much. I love palms, but they're a challenge to grow in most of our homes, and that is usually because that's a plant that wants very bright light conditions. So yes, if you're going to grow palms, the more sunlight you can get to them, the better.
Okay.
And I usually put them in like a cactus succulent mix, very sandy soil. And again, that same kind of practice, make sure I soak them, then let them dry out, soak them, let it dry out, keep the humidity up. They do great on the patio or porch, a little more of a challenge in the wintertime in your home.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right. We have 2 questions left. One is houseplant related. The other one is not, but we've got a few minutes. So I'll go ahead and we'll do both. I've had a bromeliad for a couple of years that hasn't bloomed. How can I get it to bloom? Also, I got an anthurium that had blooms. How can I get it to bloom again? So 2 questions there about blooming for 2 different plants.
So the anthurium I'm going to talk about first, because that's the easy one. This again, the anthurium, for those that you don't know, just like the peace lily right here, boom. It's not fussy like the temperature. You don't have to play any kind of tricks or games like that with it. It's, again, sometimes the plants we'll make sure that they're a little bit tight in their roots. If it's sometimes what they call over potted, if I take this plant and put it in a giant pot, it will spend its time growing roots and be less likely to produce blooms. There's no real trick or magic answer to getting to flower. It just needs to be in a good environment, which means bright indirect light, keeping it pretty consistently moist, and fertilizing, let's say monthly kind of stuff. And when it's in a good environment, it usually flowers. There's no real trick to it. Bromeliads are tricky, and sometimes it may be difficult for you to induce. Again, this is one of our auspicious plants for the Chinese New Year. So this is a bromeliad, specifically pineapples are bromeliads. And what they will do is you've got a little vase down here with specialized cells to absorb water. Again, these are epiphytes, but make sure you keep fresh water going in there. This is the flower spike that's coming up out of here. And what they're supposed to do for you, they'll come up. This lasts for a long time, several weeks or even months. It will flower. When it's done, it just dies. The mother plant dies, but she produces these offshoots. So hopefully, I don't know if yours has done that because it's been a couple years, but it should. So again, this parent plant dies, she produces offshoots that are there. To get them to flower, commercial growers induce this with plant regulators. It's like I said, this is not something you can always do at home, but there's growth regulators. One's called ethylene. I don't think you can buy it retail wise, but they'll literally spray the plants or they'll gas the plants with this ethylene to trigger a blooming response. What some references say, and I've never tried this, but you could do, is you take an apple, cut it in half, put it in a plastic bag with your bromeliad so that apple, it's giving off ethylene gas, this growth regulator that will some literature says that that can induce flowering at home. It's a little bit of a science project kind of thing.
Gotcha. I had no idea.
Yeah, that's why I don't really go into those things because I'm looking for the easy stuff.
Yes, easy things to rebloom. Okay, we've had a couple more questions going, so we've got 5 minutes before we have to call it. So we'll keep going. This might be of interest. This is not houseplant related, but it might be of interest to anybody with a yard. We had a question come in that's, is it too late to trim back plants in the yard? This was a general question, but David, do you have any general notes for people?
No,
You can always call us.
In general, my answer is it's too early.
Okay.
So what there again, there's no right, wrong, or exact answers there. But again, my example, because of just my own life, I have not touched a thing in my garden since last November. Part of it's the weather, I've been doing other stuff, so on and everything. But all that, what I'm going to use this word debris, all the stems, branches, the old foliage, all that growth that's been lingering there since winter, that's also shelter. That's where beneficial insects will shelter for the winter, where eggs are laid, where larvae develop. So as we're trying to preserve and protect insect diversity, current recommendations are to leave all that debris in place as long as possible. And it's only late in the year that we will go and start to tidy up, and we would leave it there as long as possible. But oftentimes when we start getting towards, April or something and temperatures are warming up, a lot of times we just can't help ourselves and want to go tidy up and clean up in there. But there's no problem leaving that material in your garden. I actually encourage you to do it. The only reason we go out there is just for our purposes to kind of keep it clean, tidy, and nice looking. So you have a lot of room to use your own judgment on that.
Definitely. Yeah. And I would encourage anybody who wants help with pruning this year to check our class schedule, because we are offering several classes on pruning this year.
Yeah, I'm going to talk next week or 2 weeks from now about
Oh,
pruning.
you're going to do one?
But
Oh, good. Okay.
Pruning.
I figured that you would, but yeah.
That's woody plants. I'm not talking about the perennials and herbs, but that's a little different from what we're talking about.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Okay. Next question. Is there any reason not to spray every new houseplant with horticultural oil when it comes into the house?
A couple precautions I'm going to say about the question, spraying every houseplant. One is you don't want to spray it on flowers. If you've got something that's in bloom, it just causes those blooms to sort of turn to mush, because it's an oil that's on there. But on foliage plants, I have no hesitation, other than I will say, well, I'm going to say two things. One is to read the label, because there are some succulents that might show a little bit of sensitivity to it, and everything in moderation. If you really get gung-ho and just spray and spray till this thing is like soaking saturated wet, then the oil can actually injure the plant. But if we're doing like a mist, I always say, like, hey, if you're washing your windows or countertops, I would put just a nice mist down. That is appropriate, but don't go to the extremes on it, or you can get too much of a good thing.
Okay, that makes sense. All righty, this is our last question regarding orchids. Most of this person's orchids look dead from the roots near the moss. Okay, so they're having the roots look bad. Can you cut the roots off and replant? This sounds like it might be something where we need some photos, but you might
but that's
be able to say
I know
that.
I've seen it 1,000 times, but that's one of the reasons I really like plastic, clear plastic orchid pots, because it allows you to see what's going on. So hopefully this is showing, you can see where these roots are. This was just watered, so it's green, they're plump, they're juicy, they might be white in color. That's healthy roots. If they've gone brown, black, or mushy, those are dead. So what you do is you would take it out of here, clean your scissors, with Clorox or something, trim away all the old, dead, rotten roots, repot it into some fresh material, and pamper it as it's developing new roots that's in there, which means primarily keeping the humidity up in a high humidity environment, misting it often. But that's what you pretty much must do, you know, is trim all that old dead stuff out of there, get it into some fresh media. And my very first orchid was a customer return. It had 2 leaves on it. It was like 1 step away from depth. It took me a year, but I got it back into bloom. And then I was like, hey, off to the races after that. So I've got a lot of faith in them, their ability to recover.
Resilient plants.
Yeah.
All righty. Well, that is all of our questions. Oh, thank you. We're getting some nice messages. Thank you, guys. We are glad to be back. If you think of anything else after this, please feel free to send an email or call the store. If you hit reply on any of those emails or you go through Eventbrite, that goes to me and I will happily forward your information on to David so that he can answer your questions. You are also, of course, are welcome to stop by the store, stop by the plant clinic, or give us a call. David, do you have anything you would like to mention before we wrap up?
Saturday, the official first day of spring and the start of the lunar new year. Good luck, prosperity, and health to everybody. You know, most of these plants, they all have something to do with making money or financial success. So I think I'm going to load up
Get me
a
some of
bit
those.
everything. Yeah.
Oh goodness. All right. Well, thank you so much, David. It is great to be back. Thank you to all of you who were messaging me about how you all are happy to be back. We are happy to have you and happy to start the new year. So David, thanks so much. Have a good afternoon to you and everybody else.
Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. Bye.